they emphasize here that that's all that should be in this oil, and it should contain absolutely no other psychoactive substances whatsoever. They wish to go ahead and they wish to expand the conditions. They wish to grow with the times. Science is saying, hey, you know, we have some evidence that this helps with multiple sclerosis and Crohn's disease and mitochondrial disease. We should probably address those issues too, right? That's the good thing to do for the general welfare of the population of North Carolina. And that's true. To control it, but only for this very, very narrow little level. And you can see what else they're doing there at the very last. They don't care so much about cannabidiol anymore. It's just any other cannabinoids. They look at Rachel's list and they go, well, we're really concerned about the THC here, and all that other junk, that can be in there too, and we don't really care what the percentage is, as long as there's some of that in there, that's fine. However, the evidence is pointing to the fact that cannabidiol is really, really important. It's the thing that has anti-seizure capability. It's the anti-inflammatory. It's the anti-anxiety. It's really cool stuff medicinally, and it's pretty innocuous in any other way. So it's really, really safe. But going alongside the state legislature in North Carolina, there's also House Bill 401, the North Carolina Medical Cannabis Act. This thing kind of rules Bethany's law as being obsolete and unnecessary in many respects. This comment down here is important, and Georgia has something similar to it that the Senate has done. This is really pretty cool. This statement that says, modern medical research has discovered beneficial uses for cannabis in treating or alleviating pain, nausea, and other symptoms associated with certain debilitating medical conditions. We want to make that available to our constituents, to our population in North Carolina. This is huge. This is something that North Carolina's state legislature has not said before. So some of the interesting things looking at the North Carolina bill versus the Georgia bills. 401 looks and says, we want our Department of Agriculture to be involved in this. We do. We think that's important. We think our farmers are important. We think that they have been growing stuff, these plants, for a long, long time, and they have to know how to do it pretty well. I like that. This goes down and it talks about certain controls. One of the things that's interesting about North Carolina is they have made the decision that there's no way that in a 40 or 50-day legislative session they're going to be able to address all of this stuff, and they realize that there are going to be discoveries made on an ongoing basis that may affect people. So they want to have a commission. Instead of delineating all conditions within a bill, they want to say, let's build a commission and let's have them responsible for looking at what should and should not be there and how we can best apply this as quickly as possible so the public benefits. The other thing that they're doing in this bill is they want the University of North Carolina to be involved. They're saying there isn't, and Rachel said it, there hasn't been enough research done. We need research to be done. If the federal government is not going to make it easy and safe for universities and scientists to actually research this, they want to authorize the University of North Carolina to research this so that we can know what we're doing. So instead of just saying, we're going to authorize this particular substance for these cases because we heard anecdotally that it helped Sally Jesse's granddaughter on her mother's side. And it didn't necessarily help everybody with Tourette's. It helped one person. is that enough to scientifically put it into a bill or to authorize its use for everybody? These two elements, the way North Carolina is going with this bill is pretty cool, actually, and it's pretty down to earth. They're willing to say, we've got a problem, we know it, we need to address it, we want to do it the best way. We know as legislatures, as a legislature, as legislators, we don't know enough. We're going to have to incorporate somebody else to really go ahead and do the research to do this right. This is the current law in Georgia, and they have conditions. These are many of them. These are the same conditions that Terry showed. There are many conditions here. I don't have all of them. But what I want you to look at is the allowed substance, or substances. Low THC oil. Currently defined as an oil that contains an amount of cannabidiol. Not any unique percentage, just it can have a trace. That's okay. What we're worried about in Georgia is that damn THC stuff that is so wicked and we've got to control. And so that's the main emphasis of this bill. And the cannabidiol being any amount, but the THC has to be limited by 5% dry weight again. And that 5% dry weight doesn't mean anything once you get into a liquid form. It doesn't mean anything. And yet, somebody at some point in time saw that the definition of hemp was 0.3. They knew that was important, but in reality, if you look at that study, the guys who did that study said, hey, we were just talking about the stuff we were using. We weren't making any decision that anything above and below was hemp and anything else was not. We weren't doing that. We were simply saying that the stuff we were using was 0.3. That's important. So we have all these erroneous thoughts that our legislators are trying to use to make the best possible decision they can, but they don't understand it, and no one is really thoroughly explaining it to them. Georgia did get a little smarter. The sheriffs are very active in Georgia, and they're teaching the legislators some stuff. This says tetrahydrocannabinol and tetrahydrocannabinolic acid, and what Rachel said is the acid in its raw natural state is, again, innocuous. It doesn't get you high. But man, you heat that up a little bit, you even let the sun and the summer temperatures go on it, and that THC will convert to that THCA will convert to THC, and then you can get high on it. And so these are things that Georgia has learned over time, that they have said, you know, somebody told us that it's not just THC, it's that THCA stuff too that we have to control. We've got to be careful there. And so they threw that into the bill. But look at this. Patients may possess legally only 20 fluid ounces or less at any one time. So Terry can have 20 bottles.
10.
10
of the 2 ounces.
Oh, sorry. You can have 10 of the 2 ounce bottles, and you can go through one of those one a day. As long as you don't have more than 20 fluid ounces on you, you're cool. But as long as you use one a day, you can just stay loaded all the time on this stuff, legally. Okay. And the legislators aren't looking at that. There's no way that they're looking at how much is this patient taking, how much should this patient be taking for this particular condition. Nobody knows that. So it's just a wide open market in Georgia. So this was the original bill. This was HB 1. This is significant too, in my mind, because when this was passed in 2015, it was put through early. They saw it as being important. They had their ducks in the row. It was cool. It was really, really cool. And Alan Peake is a hero of ours. I think he did some great stuff. He had no idea that 4 years later, he'd still be supplying the oil. He really had faith in the Georgia State Legislature that they would go ahead and they would create some way so that the patients could get this stuff. He really thought that. It was HB 1. The current bill, you'll see in a minute, is actually Bill 324. 324, these guys didn't get their act together to come up with the cultivation bill until just like 2 or 3 weeks ago. They should have had it available like January 1, maybe mid-January, but not March. Okay. As you can tell, I'm a little concerned about this. So
we've been living and breathing this stuff for the past couple weeks.
yeah. So this is the low THC oil definition in 2015, and you can see that it did some pretty, again, former Representative Alan Peake did some interesting things. He said no more than 5% by weight of tetrahydrocannabinol and an amount of cannabidiol equal to or greater than that amount. Why? Because the literature at the time, the scientific evidence at the time, was saying that CBD, cannabidiol, attenuated, reduced the psychomimetic effects of the THC. So you didn't, as they believed, and they don't believe this quite as strongly as they once did, but it still has merit. If you have CBD present, or as Rachel mentioned, the entourage effect of a bunch of different cannabinoids, along with the THC, you can reduce how high or how low did you get it. You can. So that's what they were trying to do in 2015. 2016, they changed the definition, as you can see here. They changed it and they said, we don't care how much cannabidiol is in there. We don't care at all. As long as the THC doesn't go beyond 5% of dry weight, we're cool. They weren't. They weren't. But the law has held since 2016, and no one has objected, either the proponents for the benefit of their children or the adults that are looking for something to relieve pain, or MS, or Parkinson's. Again, HB 324. This is what happened. At the beginning of March, this bill went into the House. They changed a very few things, not a whole lot, and it passed the House and went to the Senate. So I'll tell you what was on this bill. It created an oversight board. Okay, terrific. That's kind of nice. That's much like what North Carolina was trying to do. They created an Office of Low THC Oil Control. That's cool. No problem. That's a good thing. This is where it gets a little bit shaky. So again, this bill was only supposed to be about providing this stuff for the patients who already had their cards, or new patients, right? We just didn't have a way in the state to get it legally. So they went to private industry and they said, tell us what we need to do to come up with a good program for growing this stuff. And this is what they came up with. 2 licenses, Class 1 and Class 2. Class 1, you have to have $10 million in capital to invest. So knock out anything about small business or farmers. You're talking about people from Colorado or California who have done this and already made a lot of money, or maybe Florida, who have already made a lot of money, and they want to come and expand their market. And this is the way to do it. They were going to have 5 of these. 5 of these. And again, as Terry said, we only had 9,000 patients. Can you imagine? Can you imagine 5 companies making $10 million investments for 9,000 patients? Even double the number of patients. Is that still viable? No, it's not. So not only did it do that, but it gave those particular people an option for 5 retail dispensaries, and it allowed them to, as this says, they could deliver anywhere in the state. They could also have an unlimited amount of floor space to grow. It had to be grown inside, but they could have an unlimited amount of floor space to grow. Each of those 5 super guns, you know. Then they had the Class 2 licenses. The Class 2 licenses were for small business. Small business. Well, small business, you had to have at least $1 million in capital to invest. That's not exactly what I recall small business being. And again, it locks out the farmers and it locks out a lot of Georgia people, you know. So and they can have 3 safe access retail locations. Okay. So that's kind of interesting. There can be 5 of those, and each of them have 3. So there's 15, and then the upper guys, they can have 5 times 5. They have the market. We gave the market to those guys just now. And then we can have 10 safe access retail licenses for only $250,000. This is where maybe small business could get involved with this. But where are these guys going to get their product? They're going to get their product from those other guys that are producing it. So is it going to be financially viable for them? There's no way. There's no way these guys were going to be able to compete. We have a representative in this area in Georgia, and his name is Matt Gertler. And I have taken issue with Matt Gertler so much, and yet he believes that we should have medical cannabis in the state, but he saw this as being crony capitalism. You don't have to be Matt Gertler to look at this and go, whoa, this is crony capitalism. Somebody's getting money, right? So, good point. I agree with Matt Gertler for once, and he voted no on this particular bill. However, this bill passed the House, and it went to the Senate. Now, people that...
The drama.
There is drama. So, some of the comments that I can say about this bill. Last August, Terry went down to the Capitol and she gave her testimony before a commission of a Senate House commission. And it was, you know, very emotional. A lot of people did this. She gave her story and said, we'll have to leave the state if we can't get it legally and safely. And he actually listened to her, which was great. And the only problem is, she talks about getting off of opioids, and we were very, very, very specific in saying neuropathic pain. Neuropathic pain. We didn't say generalized pain disorder. We didn't say headaches. We didn't say osteoarthritis. Neuropathic pain. Narrow little thing here. And that has been misconstrued to be any kind of pain, any kind, this stuff works. And that's not true. That isn't true. As far as science knows, that isn't true. There are some individuals who say that it does. There are individuals that say other things remove their pain. Placebo does great sometimes for some people in removing pain. So we need science, right? But Alan Peake was very specific in his testimony when Terry gave hers. He said, I think we can get the universities involved, and I think we can create a grow, production, distribution that's nonprofit. That was very, very cool. And I believed that that's where we were going to go. Sheriff Couch in Hall County, his testimony, just only 2 or 3 weeks ago, what he did is he looked at that capacity and he said, how in the world can we justify having 5 Class 1 licenses, 5 Class 2 licenses, each of those licensees having between 3 and 5 retail establishments? How can we justify that? That didn't make any sense to him. It didn't make any sense to me either. Pat Malone interviewed me on WJUL, and his question, or his statement, was follow the money. Where's the money, and that's where the problem will be. Well, we see that $10 million play in order to get into Class 1. All of this doesn't look good for that bill. There were no price controls. So you had all these people investing big sums of money, but there were no price controls for the patients. So whatever the market will bear, well, we're desperate. You know, Terry said when asked by Senator Micah Gravely, what would happen if the medical cannabis was not available to her. And she said,
We'll have to leave.
We'll have to leave. We'll have to leave the state. And he said, I don't want you to do that. And we're going to do something about it. Now, the parents' perspective was interesting when they saw the high-priced Class 1 and Class 2 licenses, and they heard the complaints of people, farmers and small business people in Georgia, that were saying, this is a rip-off, man. This is really bad. The parents that were desperate said, you know, I don't care who makes the money, as long as my kid has the medicine that they need. And so I started looking at this bill as being the desperation greed bill. You had people that wanted to make money off of the people that were desperate for their health, right? That's a problem. That's a problem. Georgia Hope's commentary. Georgia Hope is a great nonprofit that has been working diligently since 2015 on getting medical cannabis in Georgia, primarily for kids, I'll say, and now carrying on what Allen Peake started and getting some growing and production facility in here. They looked at everything and they said, okay, well everything is going to be better, people. We're keeping the product that's already been made legal. That's that less than 5% dry weight, which again doesn't mean anything really. As far as abusing, you have the legal oil. The legal oil products would be easy to identify because in Georgia we're going to label them ourselves, and that'll be clearer. Some of the comments. Terry Norris, who is the director of the Georgia Sheriff's Association, he had all these comments to make. One of the comments was, the sheriffs are serious when they say that marijuana is a dangerous, addictive, gateway drug. Rachel has already said, this isn't a gateway drug. So I'm going to take exception with Rachel, and I'm going to say, you know what? It's proven to be a gateway drug for some people with certain addictive personalities, just because it was the first drug that was available for them to use. That's what THC. CBD, no, it doesn't apply to CBD at all. THC, it does. So it can be a gateway drug. So he's partially right. However, in Terry's case, it was an exit drug from opioids. Those balance one another out, in my mind. And so you can't look at one without looking at the other. So you're at a point of saying, well, it has benefit, but it also poses a threat. And we can't just throw that away and say that the sheriffs are full of it. The sheriffs, my experience with the sheriffs recently, they're genuinely concerned about the general welfare of their people. They really are. They don't have a whole lot of information. They, you know, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Their expertise is criminal, right? And they know how this stuff has been abused. And they're looking at it from that angle. But what I saw the sheriffs do is, and Rachel's had experiences with the sheriff in Cherokee County? Yeah.
Yes.
And these guys aren't idiots, and they will listen, and they do want to learn. Terry's doctor isn't an idiot. He wants to learn. He doesn't have any experience with this. And so we're providing, these two are providing different stories to these people than they've heard in their circles before. That's important, because I told Senator Steve Gooch last week in a one-on-one that this stuff is important, but the only way we're going to come up with the right solution is if we communicate, and if we see what the other one is talking about. If we just try to say, I know what's wrong, right, and I know what's wrong, we're never going to get there. So, that's Norris. So,